Hey guys, this is going to be a quick tutorial video on how to use the Datalooper default set. So to get the default set, you'll go to datalooperpedal.com/resources and you'll see in the Ableton Sets section there's a version for 9.77 and also 10.0, 11 coming soon. Once you download that, open that up and you'll see something that looks like this. So you'll see a couple groups here. You've got the instruments to loop, the loopers, and the loop rec. First thing to notice is that the audio instrument track that's added by default is muted. That was done to avoid adding any audio feedback, just in case you've got your speakers on and this input is set to something that's coming from a microphone that's live. So once you get your audio inputs set, you're going to want to turn that back on. So for those of you that are not super familiar with Ableton, this area right here where it says MIDI from or audio from is where you set your inputs. So let's say I have my guitar and it's plugged into channel 1. So I'm going to just look at this drop down menu, select channel 1, and then I know that I've got the correct instrument set here. I'm also going to be monitoring through this track, meaning I'm going to be listening back to whatever is coming out of this track through this track, not through the looper tracks. So to do that, I need to make sure this stays set on auto or in. And if you turn it off, then you won't hear anything. Then the same thing goes for the MIDI instruments. So let's say I have a MIDI keyboard. I'm going to set it here. That will tell me where the MIDI is coming from. And then I just have a default kind of like sine wave synthesizer, sawtooth synthesizer here, just so you can test that sound's working. So the way this works is that any track that's put in this group is then sending the audio to all the loopers. And if you look at the looper tracks, you can see that where it says audio from. And so the input of these looper tracks, rather than being from an external source where it says a track number that's plugged in directly to your computer or to your interface, it's actually taking it from an internal routing where it takes the audio out of this group and then brings it into these tracks. So whenever I put audio on the loop group here, the instrument to loop group here, it'll pop in through these DL tracks. And this is where the actual looping is going to be monitored. So if you look at all these tracks, you'll see that down here there's a special little option that says input to output never. Now this is an important thing because basically if you change this, it will change whether or not you can hear the sound coming out from your monitor track. So right now the way this is set up is that I'm not going to be able to hear any of the audio coming out of these tracks until there's a loop loaded. So let's say I loop something on these tracks, and here I'll just mute my master output so we can see what this looks like. So now I see I've got audio coming out of my group, and it's showing up on the meters here in DL 1 through 9, but I don't actually hear anything coming out of these tracks. So if I mute this, it's the same volume. I'm hearing all of the monitoring audio coming in through this one. So if I mute this, I hear nothing. Now, after I record a loop, then I hear the recorded loop coming back out of this track. And if I mute this, then I don't hear the loop anymore. But I still hear my direct signal coming out of this track. So hopefully that clarifies how the routing is working. And the other thing that means is if you want to put effects on your instruments and you want it to be heard on every loop as well as the instrument that you're listening back to, you're going to put it on these tracks. That also means that you don't really want to mess with the volume of these looper tracks unless you want the actual looper to be loud, the loop to be louder or softer than your actual monitoring track. So just keep that in mind. So hopefully that clarifies everything. This will be the default set going forward for the time being. And the only other thing that you might want to take a look at is this loop rec. And I accidentally unarmed everything when I opened this up, but this will all be armed. And what this does is if you want to record your whole session, anything that you loop, anything that you play, this takes the audio. Each one of these tracks takes the audio from the output of these looper tracks to basically make it really easy for you to go back and listen to whatever you just did. Because when you record just on the looper track, it records the audio coming in and the automation on the looper, but it doesn't actually record the output of what's coming out of the looper. So that's why we use these loop rec tracks. And this is just one way of setting this all up. I found it to be a really organized and easy way. After you record your set, what I do is just mute the loopers group and then unmute the looper rec group. And that way I'm hearing kind of a direct audio representation of what was coming out of the loopers rather than having to play through it step by step and watch the automation. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful and answers some questions you might have had. Thanks.